Here's what you need to know. That pressure isn't new. And your one question, is Yeshua, Jesus, worth what it costs to follow him? That letter is Hebrews. And tonight we're opening the case file because the answer he gave them is the answer you need right now. The first rule of investigation is to establish context. Who was this letter written to? What was happening in their world that they needed information about? In Hebrews chapter 10, verses 32 through 34, the author reminds them that they had endured a great struggle with suffering. They had been publicly exposed to insult. They had compassion on those that were in prison, and they joyfully had accepted the seizure of their property. These are not casual churchgoers. These are people who lost houses, they lost reputations, they lost safety. And here's the critical part. They made a choice. They chose Jesus, and that choice had a price. Why? Because they left the synagogue, they left the temple system, and they had aligned with the crucified Messiah, and it cost them everything. But now consider Hebrews 10, 35 through 39. It talks about not throwing away their confidence. Why? Because they needed to have endurance. Yah had said that his righteous ones would live by faith, and if they shrink back, his soul would have no pleasure in them. The pressure to reverse that choice wasn't intellectual. It was physical. It was economic, social. Going back meant getting your job back, get your family back, your legal protection back, while staying with Jesus meant staying alone. The book of Hebrews is a letter written to a people who were standing at the door of the old system with one hand on the handle, tempted to undo their choice. And the writer doesn't give them a pep talk. He gives them a legal argument. The entire structure of Hebrews is a courtroom presentation, and the case is built on one word: better. Jesus is better than the angels. He's better than Moses. He's better than the entire Levitical priesthood. He's better than the old covenant. He's better than the blood of bulls and goats. The writer is building a hierarchy, and it climaxes at one point when the substance shows up. You don't go back to the shadow. Hebrews 8 and 5 reminded them that they serve a copy and a shadow of the heavenly things. Now, a shadow, while it has the right shape, it doesn't have any substance. So the temple was a shadow. The priesthood was a shadow. The sacrifices were shadows. The writer is building the case that walking away from Jesus is not just unwise. It's not just dangerous. It's illogical. See, the same God who designed the old covenant designed it to point forward, but now the forward has arrived. Now, here's where the investigation takes a turn that the church rarely preaches. The writer of Hebrews needs to prove that Jesus is a legitimate high priest. But there's one problem. Jesus is not from Levi. He's from Judah. And by law, one from Judah cannot serve as a priest. So the writer needs a precedent, and he finds it in one of the most mysterious figures in the entire Bible. In Hebrews chapter 5, verse 6, it says, "You are a priest forever after the order of Melchizedek." Melchizedek appeared in Genesis chapter 14. No genealogy, no birth record, no death record. He receives tithes from Abraham, blesses Abraham, and then he vanishes. The writer's argument, Melchizedek's priesthood predates Levi. It's older, it's superior, and it's eternal. Hebrews 7 and 11 asks the question, if perfection were through the Levitical priesthood, why was there need for another priest to arise after the order of Melchizedek? Here's the insight. God wasn't confused. He wasn't making a mistake. He was building a hunger. The high priest kept dying. Every generation needed one. The sacrifices kept repeating. Every year needed a new offering. But Melchizedek was different. He's inserted into the genitive narrative. Think about this. 2,000 years before David wrote Psalms 1 and 10. You are a priest forever after the order of Melchizedek. And then that psalm waited another 1,000 years for the writer of Hebrews to unlock it. God planted the solution into the text before the problem ever existed. But isn't that like Yah? He provides the answers to your situation before the situation even arrives. The Melchizedek priesthood was always the destination. And Jesus, from the tribe of Judah, with no Levitical claim, is the legitimate high priest because his priesthood isn't Levitical. It's of the order of Melchizedek. It's older, it's eternal, and it's final. Which brings us to the warnings, because they'll only make sense when you understand what people were walking away from. There are 5 warning passages in Hebrews, and most people read them in isolation. That is a forensic error. Hebrews 2, 1 through 4. How shall we escape if we neglect so great a salvation? Hebrews 3 and 7 through 4:13. Do not harden your hearts as your fathers did in the rebellion. They will not enter into my rest, Yah said. Now, I know these sound harsh, but they're not. These are not threats. They're precision tools. Watch. Hebrews 6, 4 through 8. It is impossible to restore those who have once been enlightened if they fall away. Hebrews 10, 26 through 31. If we go on sinning deliberately after receiving the knowledge of the truth, there no longer remains a sacrifice for sins. Hebrews 12, 25 through 39. See that you do not refuse him who is speaking. Here's what you need to see. Every warning is aimed at one direction, and that's backward. The sin being warned against, it's not moral failure. It's not struggling with temptation. It's abandoning Jesus to return to the old system. So the writer says, if we reject the sacrifice of Messiah, there isn't another sacrifice that's waiting for us. The old system sacrifices are over. Remember, at the crucifixion, the veil of the temple was rent from the top to the bottom. There is no plan B. You remember that pressure we talked about from the beginning? That pull backward toward comfort and safety? These warnings are stopping that drift. They're a rope, a lifeline. The warning passages weren't written to save people into thinking they can lose salvation. They were written to stop drifting people from walking away from the only salvation that exists. That is through the sacrifice of Messiah. You're not in danger of losing something that you're clinging to. The warning is for the person who's already letting go. We've reached our verdict. What does Hebrews mean right now? The same pressure that hit those Hebrew believers is hitting you. It's not a Roman government. It's not a synagogue expulsion. It's something more subtle. It's a system that's offering you safety if you stay quiet, belonging if you don't ask certain questions. It's comfort dressed in old covenant language that's begging you to come back. But the writer of Hebrews is telling you what he told them. Do not throw away your confidence. Do not shrink back. Do not drift. Because what you have, what you've seen, what's been awakened in you is not a phase. It's not a theological curiosity. It's not spiritual restlessness. It's the substance. But they're offering you the shadow. The fire didn't die. It got incorporated. But you are the remnant. And remember, the remnant doesn't go back. So what's the next step? Because knowing that and living that are two entirely different things. So here is what I need you to do this week. When you feel that pull backward, you'll feel it. Maybe it's Sunday when they want you to comply. Maybe it's Tuesday when the system offers safety. Maybe Wednesday when comfort feels right. I want you to remember this. Melchizedek was God's plan before Levi ever drew a breath. Your priesthood is older than their priesthood. Your access is eternal. Your high priest doesn't die, and your sacrifice doesn't repeat. This isn't theology. This is your identity. Hebrews was written to people who had lost everything and were about to trade the substance for the shadow because the shadow felt safer. The warning passages aren't a trap. They're a rope. The 5 warnings aren't meant to terrify. They're meant to arrest the drift. But here's what seals it. Melchizedek, he's not an obscure footnote. He is the smoking gun. He's the proof that your salvation wasn't plan B. It wasn't reactive. It was planned before Levi ever existed, before the priesthood failed, before the system needed replacement, and yes, before our forefathers were dispersed. You were known, you were prepared for, you were written into this text before Levi's first generation even drew a breath. The file stays open, the evidence is law. The next time we examine what happens when the old system realizes that you're not coming back. Family, walk in what you were called to, not what you were assigned.